Welcome to this episode of Modern Sales Wisdom, the podcast with Richard Fifield. Richard is interesting. He says about himself, he helps founders make smart decisions to get valuable stuff done. And we're going to be speaking about that in a sales context. So stay tuned.
At the end of the day, if you're a business that is completely unknown and you go out cold to somebody, the only thing you've got is your passion. When you walk in that door, you may have sent some marketing assets ahead and you may have said, I don't know, I've got a new no-code, low-code platform that will transform your life. No one ever believes people that they've never heard of. There are a few people who kind of like to back the new guys, but generally it's a high-risk thing to do that. So about your fearlessness, charisma, domain knowledge, hustle and grit, basically. When you walk in that door, they are going to buy from you. And the key is around building trust.
In this episode, Richard and we're going to be speaking about all things that you need to understand in order to be successful in young companies with young products and sales processes, or maybe just founder-led sales, to understand what it is you need in order to be successful. And at the end, if you stay on till the end, if you are considering going to a startup, then listen to his advice on how he would vet whether or not you are the right candidate for that company to join. We're going to be talking about the characteristics which you need, and he talks about being fearless, about having the right charisma, about having main knowledge, which is the general understanding the hustle it takes and the grit in order to be successful. And Richard really knows what he's talking about because his track record is impressive. In the last years, he has had exits worth over $300 million of the companies which he's joined in order to scale up and then exit. And in the last 3 years alone, these companies, there are 3 companies, every year one, which has exited in over $30 million, which is just an impressive track record. And I'm really thrilled to have that conversation with him. Now, if you enjoy this conversation and you think that the world is always changing and there's so much to learn about sales and it's an ever evolving topic, and please join the people that listen to this show regularly on Spotify or on Apple Music or here on YouTube, where we've been screening the last episodes. And I'm really thankful for all of you subscribing, giving me likes, leaving comments, and sending me personal messages. It's a great pleasure to do this because I do this out of passion for the sales community, for you guys. So I'd love it if you join the conversation and press that subscribe button. Now, let's get to the conversation with Richard. Richard, it's really great to have you here on the podcast, Modern Sales Wisdom. And you have an interesting career and an interesting job. And I'd love you to explain it to you because on your LinkedIn, it says, helping founders make smart decisions and getting valuable stuff done. And I think that sounds extremely promising. But how does this link to sales?
Hi, Henry. Lovely to be on your podcast. I guess going back to 2010, I had a finance background. I was working in a large accounting firm, and I had this idea that it would be useful to and important to work with founder-led businesses to help them start, grow, and sell their businesses. So a bit of raising money to get going, a little bit of scale-up work, as we call now, and then eventually helping them sell their business. And what I'd noticed was that there was a lot of technical advisors around that journey, and I definitely call it a journey, but there wasn't much emotional support for the founders along that growth curve or along that journey. And you'll know, perhaps from your own experience and the people listening to the podcast, that it's not an easy ride. You know, it's up and down, and you've got to have a lot of resilience to get through. And therefore, the business I started was helping ambitious entrepreneurs to start, grow, and sell. The ambitious was there because I wanted to work on businesses that had at least some kind of significant exit in mind. We set a bar at $10 million, 12 million euros at that time. But it's more about the ambition to get towards a destination. And also working on businesses that were interesting. And I was curious about founders. And one of the things that we started to work on was obviously the technical advising. How do you raise money? How do you scale your business? How do you sell for the best price, etc.? But then all of the techniques around supporting founders as they go on that journey, their resilience, their fearlessness, building their charisma, building their hustle, and building their skills around a whole variety of areas. One of those being sales, of course. I started very much in a finance area, looking at cash flows, financial modeling, evaluations. But as time goes on, and I started to spend a lot of time coaching these founders and leadership groups, you realize that the thing that makes every business tick is sales. It's the lifeblood of the businesses. So transport to today, I spend most of my time speaking around and advising on strategy, people and sales. And so the last link to your question is, latterly I've become executive chairman of Memory Blue Operatics, which is an out and out sales outsourcing, a demand generation business. So I speak 5 hours a day on sales and sales strategies, and not only how do we grow that business, but how do we grow the clients of that business. So I'm really almost immersed into sales, which is an unlikely destination or endpoint for me from where I started.
Well, I love that you're saying sales is the lifeblood because obviously that's what we believe in sales. um, I'd love to know from you because you're taking, and you said it's a journey, taking entrepreneurs on an early stage into um, on that journey into becoming a successful business, and you've done that. And I know as a fact that you've talked about this before in the past that you've had millions of exits in volume. But what I'm really curious is the beginning part. So navigating the challenges of really early sales when you are a founder or you are just joining a company and supporting a founder in that sales role. What are the kind of biggest challenges which you see, and what's a good way of navigating through these kind of challenges?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing is, when you start selling at an early stage or a startup, it's about your drive and passion and ambition. And years ago, we were asked to do an investigation of the clients that we worked on, and we were asked what was the sort of characteristics of those people that were successful. Um, and we came up with a simple little model in those days, which was fearlessness plus charisma plus domain knowledge plus hustle and grit or grind. You could argue that's resilience. Um, and that's really what that challenge was. It's saying to a founder or an entrepreneur, are you fearless enough to keep going when people are saying, actually, that won't sell? The market doesn't want that. You don't really, you don't understand the market. You get rejected. You have that sort of internal focus, internal locus of control. I think if you look at psychology, which says I can affect the world rather than the world affecting me. So that fearlessness was really important, and particularly in sales. And then the second point was charisma. And that doesn't mean you're the life and soul of the party. It means that you are charismatic enough to pull people towards you and they want to work with you. And the classic example of that is your first sales hire. Really difficult one, really tricky. Probably don't have enough cash. Should I go for an experienced one? Should I go for a young hot shot? Should I go for more of a marketing led? What do I go for? It's high risk. But the fact is you had enough charisma to attract that person, maybe on a low salary or a share options or some kind of milestone payment, but you had that charisma to do it. And then you had enough domain knowledge around your product where you were that you had enough credibility and confidence that that was a product that resonated with the market. You had enough insight, and you probably could struggle your way to some kind of product market fit, to use that cliche. And then the hustle and grit side of it was that none of that means anything unless you're prepared to absolutely go for it at every opportunity, be out there hustling for your product, your sale, getting the word out there. And as those up and downs come forward, you had that sort of grit. And we looked at lots of people, and they were actually quite difficult people often, and salespeople can be quite difficult. But that difficultness allowed them to push through, and they just kept going. And that little formula I've used quite a lot over the years as a sort of first stage of challenging a sales-led founder. The second part is almost actually a finance-led thing. It's navigating the challenge of how do you balance the amount of cash you have for the runway that you need to sell. And that's really quite tricky in a startup. You're really struggling. And particularly if you pick an ICP or ideal client persona or profile, say enterprise, long sales cycle, political, difficult, you might have the perfect startup product, but you don't have the cash to run to last the sales cycle. And so you're in that terrible kind of cash flow dilemma. So you've really got to understand your finance, your business model, your margins to see how your cash flows evolve. And that's a real, if anything, that's the killer of most startups. They have great ideas, they've got great products. They're actually pretty good salesmen, salespeople, I have to say. But it, there isn't enough time. And that then says, okay, how do I get more time? I've got to reshape my product, my salesmanship and my sales cycle, or I've got to get investment. If you go for investment, it's another layer of risk on your business. And now you've got to how to manage stakeholders and you've got to have stronger finances, etc. So that's another point about how to navigate your way through that sort of early stage. Um, I think the other thing is, perhaps another huge thing is, how do you know when you've got that product market fit? In other words, how do you know that $1 of input, if I put it in, I'm going to get X, $3, $4, $5 of output? Because I've really understood the market and I've really understood the love for my products from the clients, and they essentially, they couldn't do without it. I think it's the Sean Ellis test is the latest thing, to ask your clients, if I took the client away, would they be disappointed? The product away, would they be disappointed? But it's just really, emotion is really important in startup selling. You've got to find people that emotionally buy into your product, and they do love it, because then they start to talk about it. So navigating that kind of product market fit stage and validation is so important as a startup founder, a startup sales founder. And often people I don't think they put enough effort into getting feedback on their products and delving into the insight, emotion about why people love it, why they use it. I mean, there are technical things, there may be a renewal that comes. Maybe you've got a sales cycle where the renewal is quite a long time, but if they repeat purchase, you're starting to go, actually, I can navigate that now because I can see and predict that people will pay money down the line. But first and foremost thing is that proof of product market fit. And with everyone, the more that you ask them and challenge them, you find a lot of early stage founders haven't really reached that, and they haven't put the effort in to validate it. And lo and behold, they haven't really taken the feedback on board, which is, I did sell to one big logo and I got excited. I sold to my friends and family. I sold to a bit of low hanging fruit. Wow, I'm going, this is good. Actually, they haven't really got there in terms of that fit. One last thing, I guess, is defining your ICP. I think a lot of people there is an argument to say, just go for anything, get your product out there. But I think the more that you define your ICP, the more that you can become magnetic to that ICP. You know everything about them. You know their pain. You know what they have for breakfast, etc. Your product comes along, they are magnetized to that product. They're like, wow, that's exactly what I want. So defining that's really, really important. Again, often founders, they may not put enough effort into that. And perhaps one last thing I think is systemizing what you're doing early on. So if you've got a lead gen process, if you've got even going out to your contact base or meeting people or do whatever you're doing to hustle your sales, systemize it, record it, get feedback, act on it. A lot of founders will almost say, well, that's for a scale up. I won't get proper CRM in, or I won't record things. I won't have a sales activity sheet, even the most basic little, I won't do that because that's for when I'm, a bit bigger. But often that's the kiss of death because you're not getting that early behavior in sort of embedded in you about systemizing.
Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so, I would love you to smash that subscribe button, leave me that like, and if you want to, reach out and leave me a comment as well. It makes a big difference, and I do this out of passion for you, for the sales community. Now, let's get back to the conversation and enjoy. I'm curious about one thing, because I've had somebody talk about this before, and he was very, very clear that he says, especially in early stage companies, sales has to be a founder-led thing, and the sales has to be extremely emotional. And I mean, characteristics you were speaking about, grit. It's you won't have that if it's not if you don't feel so passionate and have to make this work. But then there comes this time where you need to let it go. And that's the next stage. And I mean, you've kind of foreshadowed it that you're going to have a system in place. But what I'm also curious about, how much do you think is the person in the sales process, especially early on in the stage, delivering the trust and having the
Mm.
character that the products can actually deliver these things, or having the product validation, having a product led uh, uh, uh,
Mm.
sale where you go, well, this is the product, this is how it's worked, this is how it's going to bring the benefit? Or do typically people actually invest or buy from great salespeople?
Yeah. I mean, it's a $64,000 question, isn't it? I do think the early stage, whoever you were talking to is right, is it's around the person and the emotion. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a business that is completely unknown and you go out
Mm.
cold to somebody, the only thing you've got is your passion when you walk in that door. You
Yeah.
may have sent some marketing assets ahead and you may have said, I don't know, I've got a new no code, low code platform that will transform your life. No one ever believes people that they've never heard of. There are a few people who kind of like to back the new guys, but generally it's a high risk thing to do that. So it's about your well, it's about your fearlessness, charisma, domain knowledge, hustle, and grit. Basically, when you walk in that door, they are going to buy from you, and the key is around building trust. And it's not so much building trust at the first stage that your product would do everything that they want it to do. It's more
Mhm.
around matching the emotion of that buyer. And remember, the buyer could be different people. It could be a user, but it could be somebody who actually got to make the decision to buy. It could be a technical
Yeah.
person or whatever. So, but somewhere in that process, you've got to be able to match a different set of emotional levels of these people of the people you're meeting. Um, that classic. There's a thing called I think by Robert Dilts, logical levels. You probably see where you kind of build up at various levels. I think it's from things like behaviors, identities, beliefs, values. I mean, one great tip is if you can go into the room and you have researched that client, possibly through an intermediary or a third party or whatever, and you've got some idea of their values, because that's quite high up on this sort of logical level. If you match someone's values early on, they will really start to trust you. And there's a bit of manipulation in
Mm.
there. You can learn all these techniques, but ultimately, if I walk in the room, even simple things, we both got children, we both like dogs, we both like sport, with whatever, we've both got beards, um,
Yeah.
blonde hair. It doesn't matter. We've got something where we can match and we can start to build a relationship because I've got nothing else. When you walk in the door to me to sell, I don't know you from anyone. So after that, I think you're into the detail of the product, but even the closer you can get emotionally to somebody, the more you'll understand their real position, and that's what you're after. I think founders, bizarrely, can find the real emotional positions of buyers more easily than salespeople can. There's something about I'm coming
Mhm.
in, it's my business, I put my life on the line for it. I'd really love you to have this product and that makes you kind of open up and go, I really want to help
Yeah.
you. So I absolutely agree. It's a founder led model through their passion first and then product. I think the scale up obviously is very different. And we may ask about that, but then the client probably knows more about you or knows about the features, may have some comparators on the internet around you against somebody else. They're a little bit more attuned to the product, and it also they're not so worried. If there's somebody buying as well, may not have lost that connection to a founder. We've moved on now. You've got 50
Yeah.
people, you sold to lots. I'm not so interested in Henry. I want Richard, the salesman. In fact, I probably want Richard, the convincer, somebody who really understands the technicalities of my business, which means I can take the risk on you. This guy will reduce my risk. So it's more around that.
Mhm. So the safe route. Now, taking and you've said an important thing. You move on to the next stage, which is a scale up. How do you get these leads? I mean, the people listening here are
Mm.
salespeople or people that work very closely in sales, so they need to understand what are the potential leads that they can generate if you have no budget or very little
Yeah.
budget, very little marketing, um, then there's always the phone. You can pick up and call random people and have
Mm.
success, and it works. But how do you structure lead generation in a way that in a very early stage with very little resources?
Yeah. I mean, um, I think it is down to the initial contact book of the founder and the people around the
Mhm.
founder. And it helps if you've built the product that you would love and use as well. I think that's another factor of a startup. It's really important. You think that product solves your world as well, your world's problem as well as everyone else. Power when you talk to people. But I think a founder led sales approach is very much my contact book, my black book, everyone I know. And I start to build and I start to go out and everybody I meet, if I'm charismatic enough, they will say, you want to speak to this person. And if you're good enough, you're always asking for that. I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation. Is there anyone else I can speak to? And because all you're trying to do is get early validation. Now, I think there's a point that comes quite quickly. Maybe you have enough money to get some content and some kind of research into the community. So, where are your ICPs? Where do they hang out? Who do they hang out
Mm.
with? And you're trying to get a view as a founder, and you can in this world of of information, of where's their community, and you map that community. And again, out of that pops maybe a sort of an interesting channel. Oh, I see my ICPs always connect with these people. I've got a connection to that person. So you go to the channel person and you start to convince them with your charisma and passion. And they go, well, actually, we have got 100 of those types of people. Can we find
Mhm.
some way at least to get one referral so the person doesn't risk their whole reputation on putting you in there? And then you start to think around, okay, maybe I can get some early stage content to push out to that community. And depends on the money about the level of a website or something like that. Maybe you haven't even got a website, but let's say you've got a basic one. Maybe you can start to push maybe some inbound, but some inbound content work out to that community.
Mhm.
And then you're starting to see whether you've got traction. Now, if you've got a product that, again, different to the ICP, I mean, if you've got a direct consumer type product, there's a different strategy here. But I think most of your listeners might be probably more B2B tech, but I don't know that.
B2B tech, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's the point.
you're more out, you'll be moving towards more channel, more kind of sort of inbound marketing type of work, maybe some organic outreach, and eventually you'll come to some kind of AE model when you get a
Yeah.
little larger with maybe some lead gen guys underneath the AE guys. But that early stage is very much around, I've reached, I'm trying to reach 20 people a month. And of those 20, two of those look like channels. And suddenly over 3 or 4 months, I reached 100 people, 10 channels. I then build some content and I start to try and get some kind of inbound activity to a lead magnet of some description, whether it's a download
Yeah.
or so you've got some top of funnel stuff going on. But I think that you've got to do that as yourself as a founder. There's no other money. That's your hustly bit. You just got to go for it.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap up, I'd love to get one more perspective on you. And I mean, I've seen a lot of people join large corporations and sales. That's where I've worked, and I find my sweet spot. Let's put it, and building the organizations there. And then they go to small companies from there, and they think, well, now, and they're missing the whole marketing apparatus. They're missing the whole brand. They're missing. So there's different types of sales. And this is what I've kind of, I mean, it's probably general knowledge as well, but there's founder led sales. There's, they could join a young company where the founder has been super successful had the charismatic founder who was been able. And how do you find your spot in there? And then there's other companies that I've heard of as well, and people joined where it was always about the product and making the product market fit, and the people were actually not too um, they were always worried about making sure that the product fits exactly a certain niche, and they were, ICP exactly very, very targeted towards that. Usually, people that left other companies and did something very similar, they've had that experience, and I'm just curious, what would you recommend to somebody if you are considering going to a smaller company
Yeah.
from a corporate? What would you ask or look out for if you were that salesperson in order that you have the ability to be a very successful AE in those? Because I mean, the sweet spot, obviously, with the momentum of growth is in the young companies.
Yeah.
That's the fun, right? I mean, we as
Yeah.
salespeople love
Absolutely.
the entrepreneurship of it as
Mm.
well, and being, you know, it's exciting,
Yeah.
but you don't want to burn yourself.
Yeah.
At the end, you are not the founder. What would you
Yeah.
recommend?
It's a
What do you
graveyard
say?
of of people from large corporates who come into startups. I think partly because the founders have no idea how to hire their first salesperson. They just
Mm,
don't. Perhaps they do if they come from a sales background, but even then, I think it's so different being in a startup to being in maybe in a larger corporate, where, as you say, you've got that armor around you, and everyone does things. I mean, a good example would be your computer breaks down. In a large corporate, somebody appears, within 10 minutes and fixes it. In a startup, it's all chaos, and you've lost all of the stuff that you were going to talk to sales concepts. And so, small things are terrible, but I think the other thing is, first of all, you've got to do more, to use a finance term, due diligence on both the founder, their personality, and the product, the stage of where it's at in that product market fit journey. So many
mm,
sales, and I'm thinking of one specifically right at this point in time in a no code, low code platform business, which I mentioned earlier. Um, the founder thought that he was at a point where he had product market fit, said to the salesperson, "It's great. Look, we've sold to these various businesses, and all we've got to do now is get some less lists. And actually, if you're a good outbound guy, ring these people up, and it'll be fine because you'll get lots of leads and we'll convert, no problem at all." But the reality was they weren't at that stage. So the person came in, spoke to lots of people, realized that not only they weren't the product market fit, but the clients they had at the moment, they weren't being serviced well enough. So they were about to churn.
mm,
So all of a sudden, you're back a stage, and you weren't that person. You come in on a certain set of competencies, a job spec. So you've really got to work hard, and you should talk to the founder, the people in the business. If you can, to existing clients, really go into the pipeline, dig around a lot. Even work hard as to what is the job spec and the competencies and the deliverables. Again, one of the things that you see a lot is salespeople join, or marketing stroke salespeople, and you say, "Well, what are they supposed to achieve?" And the founder goes, "Well, I'm not really sure, because I don't, but I just know I need a salesperson, and this person was recommended to me, and probably the right price because I don't have too much money, and it'll all
mm,
be okay." Within 3 months, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The other big mistake is this issue of leads. So if you come in and you're not a lead gen person, you have to have leads. So you really got to
mm,
dig into the organization's lead gen structure, capabilities, previous success. And often you find that you're the wrong person in at this point in time. They just don't even have enough leads to keep you going. And so you almost, where you either you wither, or you have to turn yourself into a lead gen person, which is probably not what you wanted to do, and you may have done several years before. So you've really got to be disciplined about it. For the founders, to be honest, the way it works typically is they hire their first sales guy. It's a disaster. They go very quickly. They hire the next person. It's semi okay. The third person, they get it right. So they almost
mm.
run through three people just to get to the point where it's right. It's no good for the sales guy coming in, but that's the way it goes, because they just don't, it's unconscious incompetence. If you think about that model, they really have no
Yeah.
idea what they need to do in the sales side. And then we haven't even spoken about the sophistication of the clients and the product and things like that. So due diligence is so important. And often it's more about just the job spec and the salary. And I'm really excited to join a startup than it is about
Yeah.
getting into the detail.
Yeah. I love that answer. I think that's going to be extremely valuable for people listening to this who are considering taking a move. Richard, before I ask the last question, I just want to say thank you so much. We've already come to time. It's been a very, very quick conversation, this one. Um, I think it's been very inspiring talking to you, and also the last conversations which we've had. I really value it, the conversation. And there was, let's leave it to one last question, which would be, what would you say is the biggest thing that you've learned or discovered over time about sales?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been asked this before, and it's a slightly strange answer. But I think the biggest thing I've learned is, and I'll bring in this term that I actually hate, imposter syndrome. And that was, oh, I'm in the room and I'm supposed to be selling, and I don't. And I used to do a lot of selling as the lead sales guy at my previous business. Oh God, I don't feel I'm qualified to do this, and I don't know enough about the product, and I don't have enough sales skills or whatever. And what I realized over time, the biggest thing I learned was actually it was a cover. I just wasn't competent enough to do the things that I was supposed to be doing. So I've now realized it was nothing to do with that sort of deep, weird emotion that my father beat me or something like that. It was the fact that I should have learned more about sales skills. I should have learned more about the product. I should have done more research about the client before I got there. And then when I started to do those things, suddenly my confidence went up in the room. I could challenge the client. I could be on equal terms with them. And they loved the meetings then because suddenly, and everyone would say, oh, you're so more confident. It wasn't that. It was about competency. So it was around
Mm.
knuckling down and understand the basics of your skills and your product and the way that you present. So that's one of the biggest things I've learned in sales. And don't disguise difficult sales things. Don't disguise or hide your competency level for when things aren't going quite so well in the sales environment.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Richard. It's been a great conversation.
Henry, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And good luck to everyone listening.
I truly hope you enjoyed that conversation with Richard as much as I did. There's actually two big takeaways. The first one really about being the characteristics which he sees in a founder or a person who's going to be successful in sales in an early stage, which is all about being fearless, having the right charisma, having the main knowledge, the hustle and the grit. Kind of reminds me of the 5 things I talked about in the last episode. If you haven't done so, make sure you smash that. I'll leave a link in the description. And the other thing is when he talks about how you have to do your due diligence if you consider joining a young company. And I've seen this so many times of people leaving larger corporations in order to go to startups because they see all the successful and miserably failing. And I don't want you to be that person because there are fantastic startups with huge potentials. But you need to understand what qualities you bring to the table and what they need. And if that fits, then you've got a win-win and you can go full throttle. It's going to be amazing. But if not, then make sure you find a place where you can join to be successful. With that said, I would love you to join the Modern Sales Wisdom avid listeners who join every week and smash that subscribe button, leave a like, and be part of this community of people who always believe that sales is about wisdom. It's about growing your mind. It's a never-ending story. And if you want to join that journey, make sure to be part of it. Until then, it's been a real pleasure. As always, take care, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.